Who was Hercules? What did he do? Why are there so many different versions of his story? Let's find out. There are hundreds of versions of Hercules' story from all over the ancient world. The most popular version is the one written by the Greek poet Homeric, but that isn't the only one. There are also the versions from Hesiod, Ovid, and Pseudo-Apollodorus. The Roman poets also wrote about him, and it seems like every culture had its own hero who was very similar to Hercules. The Egyptians had their own Hercules named Heraclides. The Celts had a war god called Tyrannus, and the Norsemen had Thor, who was obviously inspired by Hercules. What made Hercules so appealing to these cultures? Was it his great strength? Was it his courage or his determination? Maybe it was his tragic flaws that made people relate to him more. Whatever the reason, Hercules is still one of the most famous heroes of all time. In this episode of Greek Mythology Explained, we're going to look at the life of Hercules, where he came from, what his accomplishments were, and how he became a god. If you want to learn about other figures from mythology, stay tuned for future episodes. Hercules was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Alcmena. His father was a king of the gods who ruled from Mount Olympus, and his mother was the daughter of the king of Tiryns. She was chosen by the god Hermes to be the mother of Hercules because she was a descendant of Perseus and a great-granddaughter of Zeus. This made Hercules not only the son of Zeus, but also his nephew, since Zeus' brother was Perseus. When Zeus decided to have a son with Alcmena, he disguised himself as her husband, snuck into her bedroom while her husband was away and impregnated her. But he wasn't done there. He went to another woman that same night and did the same thing to her. Her name was Stheneboia, and she was married to a man named Eurystheus. Zeus tricked her into thinking he was her husband, too. The next year, both women gave birth around the same time. Alcmena gave birth to Hercules, and Steno beaked Eurystheus, who would become Hercules' main rival. You see, when Zeus went to Stheno that night, he used magic to make sure that she would give birth to a male first, so that male child would inherit the throne of Mycenae. That's why Eurystheus became Hercules' greatest enemy. He felt that Hercules wasn't just a bastard, but also an illegitimate heir to his father's throne. It was obvious that Hercules wasn't like other children. When he was born, he was fully grown and dressed in bronze armor. Alcmena sent her old nurse to go get Hermes, the messenger of the gods, so he could take her son back to Olympus. However, when Hermes arrived, he found that Hercules had already left the crib. The baby had strangled 2 snakes that were sent by Hera to kill him and was playing with their severed heads. Alcmena realized that her son wasn't meant for this world. It was a blessing and a curse to be the son of a god, and she knew that she couldn't keep him safe. So she called for her husband and told him to take their son to live with his parents in Olympus. But when they got there, Zeus told them that Hercules was destined to live a mortal life. He said that the only way for him to escape his fate was to live as a mortal until he turned 30 years old. Then he could return to Olympus and take his rightful place among the gods. Of course, Alcmena didn't want her son to live a mortal life. She begged her husband to let Hercules come back to Olympus, but Amphitryon refused. He said that it was Zeus's decision and that he wouldn't interfere. So Hercules grew up on Earth as the son of a mortal man and a goddess. You might think that growing up in Olympus would have been better than growing up on Earth, but it wasn't. That's because Hera hated Hercules. As you may know, she was Zeus's wife, but that didn't stop him from having a lot of affairs with both goddesses and mortals. Every time Zeus had a son with a mortal woman, Hera punished that woman and her son. In Hercules' case, she turned his adoptive parents against him. They never accepted him as their own and treated him like a slave. They forced him to do hard labor for them, and Hercules hated his life. So when he turned 20 years old, he went to see the Oracle of Delphi to find out what his destiny was. The oracle told him that if he wanted to escape his miserable life, he needed to become a hero and complete 12 labors. If he managed to do that, he would become immortal and live among the gods forever. The first labor was to kill the Nemean lion. It was a giant beast with impenetrable skin that lived in a cave outside the city of Nemea. Hercules went to the cave and fought the lion. He hit it several times, but the beast's skin was too thick for his arrows, so he did something very clever. He pulled out a large rock and hurled it at the lion. The rock went through the beast's skin and killed it. Then Hercules skinned the lion and wore its hide as a cloak. It was so thick that no weapon could penetrate it, so it was perfect for protecting him from harm. His second labor was to kill the Lernaean hydra. It was a water snake with 9 heads that lived in a marsh near the city of Lerna. Each time Hercules cut off one of its heads, 2 new heads grew back in its place. So he couldn't defeat it by just chopping off its heads. But he did something even smarter. After cutting off one of its heads, he cauterized the wound with a burning torch. That prevented new heads from growing back. And finally, he was able to kill the beast. Then he took its poisonous blood and dipped his arrows in it. Now they were much more deadly. The third labor was to capture some man-eating horses that were terrorizing the city of Echeion. These horses were huge and fast, and they were being protected by a giant named Cacus. Hercules managed to defeat Cacus and tame the horses. He used them to pull his chariot for the rest of his life. The fourth labor was to steal some cattle from a giant named Geryon. Geryon had 3 heads and 3 bodies, and he was so strong that Hercules couldn't defeat him in a fight. So he did something unexpected. He shot an arrow at the giant's right hand, which was so big that it turned into a new full-grown bull. Then Hercules shot the giant's left hand, and it turned into a lion. Then he killed both the lion and the bull. And finally, he took out Geryon's eyes and roasted them over a fire until they were cooked. He then threw them to the ground and stamped on them with his foot. That made them explode, and Geryon was no match for Hercules after that. Hercules' 5th labor was to clean King Ajax's stables in a single day. Ajax had thousands of horses, and their stables were so filthy that it would take a whole army of men months to clean them. But Hercules managed to do it all by himself in just one day. The 6th labor was to steal some golden apples that belonged to the Hesperides. These were the daughters of Atlas, and they guarded the apples that were guarded by a dragon named Ladon. Hercules managed to sneak past the dragon and steal one of the apples. The 7th labor was to capture a wild boar that was terrorizing the city of Cremona. This boar was huge and extremely aggressive, but Hercules managed to catch it. The 8th labor was to steal some cattle from a giant named Chrysaor. Chrysaor had 1 body and 2 heads, and he was also immortal, but Hercules managed to kill him. The 9th labor was to capture a giant bird that was terrorizing the city of Messenia. This bird was huge and had sharp talons that could rip men to shreds, but Hercules managed to catch it. For his 10th labor, Hercules had to bring back some ointment that was made by the giantess Chimera. This ointment was so powerful that it could heal any wound, even if it was fatal. For his 11th labor, Hercules had to bring back some live fish from the river called the Alpheus. The fish were so slippery that they couldn't be caught, but Hercules managed to do it. And finally, for his 12th labor, Hercules had to steal some belts that belonged to the queen of the Amazons. The Amazons were a tribe of fierce female warriors, and their queen was the most powerful of them all. So these were Hercules' 12 labors. He completed them all and became immortal. He lived among the gods in Olympus, but his life there wasn't much better than his life on Earth. Hera continued to persecute him, and eventually she drove him insane. That's when he did his most famous feat. He killed his wife and children. When he came back to his senses, he was so horrified by what he had done that he hung himself. Zeus saw how sad his son was, so he sent an eagle to cut down his body and bring it back to Olympus. There, Hercules was given the title of hero, and his worship spread throughout Greece. He became one of the most famous heroes of all time, and his statue was placed next to those of the greatest gods. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more episodes of Greek Mythology Explained.